Hello and welcome to Game Pulse. Today we're diving into an exciting new adventure with none other than Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I'm David, and let's explore everything we know about this highly anticipated game. Whoever has found the Ark of the Covenant, discovered the Holy Grail, and even traversed the lost city of Atlantis should have already experienced enough for 3 lifetimes. But Indiana Jones keeps finding his way back into adventure. Starting on December 9th, the whip-wielding archaeologist and university professor will once again don his iconic fedora and embark on his next world-spanning journey, this time on PC and Xbox Series. In early 2025, the game will also be available for PS5. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is set to continue the legacy of the franchise and elevate it to entirely new heights. And honestly, the first glimpses of this first-person adventure, especially the most recent showcase at the Summer Games Fest, have us feeling quite optimistic. The scenes we've seen so far exude that classic indie charm, but what about the gameplay itself? So far, the focus has mainly been on atmosphere and story, not to mention the unusual first-person perspective for an Indiana Jones game. However, at Gamescom 2024, we finally got to see new gameplay footage and learn plenty of details about the actual mechanics. The biggest surprise, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle doesn't just emphasize the action in action-adventure, but also heavily focuses on the adventure side. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is set between Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade, with MachineGames ensuring that this is the Indy we all know and love. No aging man or professor burdened by doubts. This is the true Indiana Jones. And as usual, Indy stumbles into a massive mess by chance. A mysterious giant steals an artifact from Barnett College in the dead of night, kicking off a race for the titular Great Circle, pitting Dr. Jones against the Nazi villain Dr. Voss. So far, so familiar. Joining Indy on his travels this time is Italian journalist Gina Lombardi, though she's not interested in ancient artifacts and puzzles. Instead, she's searching for her missing sister. The result? A classic adventure story filled with villains, reluctant companions, humor, creepy critters, and lighting that feels like it's straight out of the first films. In short, The Great Circle looks like it's hitting all the right notes. But how does it actually play? In a game with a linear story and plenty of indie charm, the question arises, how does the gameplay tie it all together? The short version is that The Great Circle feels like Wolfenstein, but with tons of puzzles, more freedom, and a bit more calm. Let's break that down. Just like the films and previous games, The Great Circle tells a linear story, so it's no surprise that the game has a similarly linear level design. You arrive in an area, complete objectives, experience story beats through cutscenes, and then move on to the next area. However, the game also features relatively large levels, as you can see on the map. You can either follow the campaign directly or explore many optional puzzles and side missions. Not all levels are open though. There will be more linear sections that push the story forward and focus heavily on set-piece moments. MachineGames wants to include big cinematic moments like a Zeppelin sequence. You can even revisit previous levels to complete missed objectives, even if that doesn't always make sense story-wise. But the Great Circle wants to fuel your sense of discovery. Whether in the main campaign or optional content, exploration and puzzles are core elements of the game. While there are plenty of combat scenarios, more on that later, they don't take up as much space as the quieter moments. Despite his whip and pistol, Indy is still first and foremost a professor, and that's reflected in the gameplay. The most important tools in the game aren't weapons, but a camera, a notebook, and your brain. The camera allows you to unlock background information about locations and objects, and the photos also serve as hints for many puzzles. The notebook, on the other hand, holds all clues, maps, and quests, acting as your guide through the adventure and occasionally offering helpful tips. Here's an example of how puzzles might work. You find yourself in front of a statue, take a picture to get some background info, and notice a bowl in front of the statue. You pour some wine you found earlier into the bowl, revealing a number. Later, after knocking down a wall, you set that number on a lever. In another section, you throw a spear into a wall to swing across a gap using Indy's signature whip. Or maybe you'll uncover a hidden passage in a fireplace simply by burning away the obstacle. These are just a few small examples, but there will be larger and more challenging puzzles. MachineGames even drew inspiration from the old Indiana Jones adventures from the 90s. You know the ones, but it remains to be seen how well the puzzles balance out. If they're too hard, they could slow the story unnecessarily. Too easy, and we'll feel underwhelmed. Finding the right sweet spot is tricky, and even if they nail it, how well will they integrate into the game? Will they feel tacked on, or will they enhance the experience? And what about proper side missions? We haven't seen any of those yet. What we have seen are adventure points, which seem designed to push us toward exploration. You earn points for pretty much everything, solving puzzles, discovering areas, or taking special photos. This feature will likely appeal to fans of the old point-and-click games, where you earned points for achieving a high IQ, or rather, a high Indy quotient. Ah, the 90s. In the Great Circle, these points do more than show off your smarts. They also unlock skills. For example, one skill allows Indy to get back up after being defeated thanks to a special ability you've unlocked. However, there are still a lot of questions about this system. First, you have to find skill books in the levels. How do the points tie into those books? Can you only unlock them with enough points? Do you need a certain amount of points to even find them? This system raises more questions about what exactly Indy can still learn, given that he's already a well-established character. We're still unsure about this mechanic. At best, it creates a satisfying reward loop. At worst, the skills could feel out of place. To fully explore the various areas and uncover all hidden treasures and puzzles, Indy can do more than just solve riddles. He can climb and even disguise himself. Anyone familiar with Indy knows he has a penchant for changing outfits. Just like in the LucasArts adventures, you'll sometimes swap clothes to access previously unreachable areas. For instance, we saw Indy go from Dr. Jones to Father Jones. But beware, just like in the Hitman series, certain NPCs can see through your disguise. Whether the disguise mechanic will reach the depth of Hitman remains to be seen. We do know that the disguises are mostly predetermined, required by the story in some missions, while in others, you can choose to change clothes at your discretion. During climbing sections, the Great Circle also switches from first-person to third-person perspective, similar to the last two Deus Ex titles, where the camera pulls out during swings and climbs. Indy moves a bit slower here, which the developers say is intentional. After all, he's a professor, not an acrobat. That said, extended climbing sequences could get tedious, and we wouldn't mind some skills for smoother gameplay like faster climbing. Regarding game length, the developers didn't provide specifics, saying it depends on how much optional content you pursue. However, they did say this is their biggest project yet, so the campaign alone will likely surpass the roughly 12 hours of Wolfenstein 2. That was a big chunk of puzzles and adventure, but let's not forget, this is still an action adventure, meaning there's plenty of combat. Melee combat is the main focus, with blocking, dodging, and chaining punches into combos. Just like in the films, the environment always provides surprises, and anything that glows can be used as a weapon, whether it's a bottle or a chair. You can even use the whip to disarm enemies or smack them in the face. In the footage we've seen, the fight still looked a bit stiff due to choppy animations, but the combat was at least easy to follow. We'll need to play it ourselves to judge whether the gameplay plan works. If you want things to move a bit faster, you can always pull out a firearm, but since guns have been rare in trailers, we're assuming that ammo will be scarce, or Indy won't be able to take much damage. He's not exactly young anymore. If all-out action isn't your style, you can also take a stealthier approach, using the environment to lure enemies into traps and silently take them down. You'll even be able to hide bodies. Whether you can play the whole game in stealth mode remains a mystery, as the developers didn't confirm either way. So, to wrap things up, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle seems like it's doing almost everything right so far. MachineGames clearly understands that indie is not just about action, but about discovery and exploration in ever-changing environments. They also know they're making a game, not a movie, so they've taken some smart liberties, like with the optional content and point system. At this point, there's no reason to think The Great Circle won't be a massive success. Bethesda just needs to ramp up the marketing because, for such an important game, there's surprisingly little material out there. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into Indiana Jones and The Great Circle. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to Game Pulse for more gaming news, updates, and reviews. See you next time.